Hey everyone, you're listening to the Simple Electronics Podcast. I'm your host, Dan from the Simple Electronics YouTube channel. This episode is sponsored by PCBWay, but more on them a little bit later. With me today is absolutely no one. It's just me. As some of you may know, as of late, I have been drowning in work. And so that's not getting any better anytime soon. And so I didn't go through the extra work it is to coordinate with someone else, to have someone else on the podcast. So it is just me today. I'm recording this episode on February 28th, and here in Ottawa, we just got dumped on with a whole bunch of snow. So my back is a little bit on the hurdy side after having cleared the entire driveway, and I'm expecting a bunch of snowplows overnight to come and make snowbanks on the road and on the sidewalk. And so tomorrow when I head to class, I'm going to have to clear all that. So that's going to be fantastic. That's the joys of living in Canada. I guess if I lived in Florida, I wouldn't have to worry about other things like, alligators and whatever. So in hindsight, probably snow is the better option here. I've had a few people actually ask me why I don't build a little remote control snowblower type thing. And I'll tell you very simply, snow is much heavier than you think. When it's like really cold outside, we're talking about, minus 15 Celsius and below, whatever that is in Fahrenheit. I can't really edit it onto the screen for you, but it is what it is. Then the snow comes down and it stays really fluffy. But the thing is that a cold snow doesn't happen all that often. It typically, at least in my area, it snows a lot more when the weather is hovering around the freezing point, a couple degrees below freezing. And that's when snow is wet and very, very heavy. And then when you get snowbanks created by plows, you get this this pressure heating on the snow, right? If you compact snow into a snowball, it gets more dense because you're actually melting some of that snow mechanically by raising the pressure, and that becomes super dense, almost the weight of water, maybe about 3/4 of the weight of water. And so to move that is a lot of effort. And of course you can't just drive through it because then the temperature drops, and when you drive through it, it makes obviously compacts it some more, makes it into ice, and when the weather drops, it just solidifies into an unbreakable cube at that point. So if you were to make a little device for throwing snow around, like some sort of small snowblower, you need a lot of power for that. I mean, very recently, I suppose with advances in, motor tech, motors are getting a little bit cheaper. You can buy a snowblower that plugs into the wall. They're a couple $100, so they're not that expensive. But the thing is, they can only be used when the snow is relatively light. When you get those cold snows. I suppose they'd be a little bit better, somewhere like in Alaska where where it's like colder for longer and it snows while it's cold. Here, I suspect that it would only be good for, a couple of our snowfalls throughout the entire year. And then you have the additional burden of keeping that snowblower, the electric snowblower, around all year round, and you're only really going to use it like 10 times during the entire year. So, I mean, it would be a dream to be able to build something like that, but it's just, I don't think it's worth it. My personal strategy has been using a snow scoop, like a giant shovel that you just push along the ground instead of, shoveling and pulling up. So it's been a little bit better on my back, but it's still not great. It's still, you have to jerk the shovel back to, empty it out, and you have to tilt it downwards in order to, push it up a hill to dump the snow. So yeah, I'm getting old, 35 years old, but I've been in the automotive industry for the last, 15 years. No, more than that, 17 years. I started in 2006. So whatever that does. So it's been really rough on my back. And so, snow days like that really slow me down quite a bit. On top of that, I've been busy as hell with school because I've got a new group of students. I'm always trying to improve my material, make it clearer, make better examples. I have to, design more concise and more interesting labs to do with the cars. It's really fun though. This portion of the semester, we're playing with oscilloscopes, and a lot of my students, they kind of complain that the electrical subjects, which I teach, are some of the hardest subjects to sort of comprehend because electricity is not visual. That's what they tell me. Electricity is not something you can see. You can't really see the flow of electrons. You don't really know which wires have power on them. And, the circuits are a little bit haphazard, a little bit like a mix of everything. There's more than one circuit in a wire loom, all sorts of things like this. But I'm trying to show them that actually it's the opposite. That electricity is one of the only things you can see. It's just that you do need the right devices in order to see them. So the oscilloscope is one of those things. So us as electronics hobbyists, we're well versed in oscilloscopes. We understand that what an oscilloscope does, what it's used for. You can actually read the signaling. You can see PWM, pulses and all sorts of things like that. But for automotive trades folks, they're a little bit afraid of the oscilloscope. It's kind of that thing where you're afraid of what you don't understand. They're fairly well versed with the multimeters. They can check voltage at a plug. They can unplug a device and check its resistance. And they can open up a circuit and use a multimeter in current mode to read the current in a circuit. But what they have trouble putting two and two together with is that an oscilloscope is literally just a fast multimeter. It does a lot of the same functions of the multimeter, especially in volt mode, except it has just two dimensions to it instead of just one. You're not looking at a static voltage in a circuit. You're looking at voltage over time. It's graphed over time. And in fact, you folks listening, probably electronics enthusiasts, let me know in the comments on whatever platform you're using, if there's allowed comments. If you're not an electronics enthusiast, you're just listening, to this from the outside of the hobby. But in the automotive world, we typically don't even need that fast of a scope. I think Snap-on's oscilloscopes that they sell for automotive use is, I think it takes like 50 kilo samples per second, whereas like an entry-level decent hobbyist oscilloscope will have 1 gig samples per second. So, instead of 50,000, it'll actually take 1 billion samples per second. And the Snap-on scopes are typically 2-channel, whereas a decent hobby starter one is 2-channel as well, but with a function gen usually. And even the Rigol 1054Z has 4 channels available to you. And so the signals in automotive are, relatively slow. If you think of stuff that we would check, let's say like injector pulse or ignition pulse, ignition signals, they happen in the span of a few milliseconds, not like microseconds, picoseconds. It's not down there. It's like milliseconds range. And so I have fun showing them that really what you're looking at on the oscilloscope is just a multimeter reading, but with, the added function of time. So you can look at how a signal varies over time. And on top of that, you use a current clamp, and the use of a current clamp is like mind-blowing, because now not only, can you check that a circuit is active, it has, voltage going to it, but you can see if it actually does work, because if there is a known voltage in a car, it's about 14 volts or so while it's running, usually about 13.8. And then you can see like a current ramp up and then shoot down to zero, and then ramp up and then shoot down to zero. Then that means that you are making something work, right? The more current in that circuit, the more work it's doing for any given voltage, because that's just Ohm's law, or Watt's law in that case. It's voltage multiplied by current equals power, and power is work. And so, for example, you can have an ignition coil, which, for those of you that don't know, it provides the spark to the spark plug, which lights the air-fuel mixture in a cylinder. It's basically just a voltage transformer or a current transformer. It transforms your 12 to 14 volts from your battery in your car up to 30,000 volts in order to jump the gap on a spark plug to make a nice hot zone to light the air-fuel mixture. Well, you can check if that ignition coil is getting, positive voltage. You can check that the ground is good. And you can also check to see if the computer is sending it a signal to trigger. However, that doesn't mean that the internal workings are actually doing anything. When you put a current clamp on the positive, like let's say the positive voltage going into the coil, you can actually see the current ramp up, because it's an inductive coil, right? It resists the flow of current, but on top of that, it saturates a magnetic core, because it's just a transformer. That's all it does. So in the primary winding, it saturates the magnetic core, and you'll see the current will ramp up until the core is saturated, and then it'll plateau, and then it'll go away instantly as the ignition coil cuts off the positive, the voltage going to it, or the current going to it. And that's when it generates the spark. So I'm trying to explain to the students that, yeah, you can check if 12 volts is making it to the coil. You can check if the ground is connected to the coil, and you can check if the signal is getting to the coil. But you can do all three of these at the same time by just putting a current clamp around the positive wire. And there's other things they can do too, mind you. We do have like test lights that you put in series with the coil so that it lights up every time the spark goes through. But either way, it's, electricity to me is actually the most visual part of diagnosing a car. You can tell if there's current going through it. All you need is a current clamp. Ideally, a current clamp and an oscilloscope. You can tell if voltage is getting to a device, right? A multimeter will tell you that. A test light will give you that. A test light is a common rapid test tool we use in automotive. It's literally a light bulb with in a screwdriver handle with a pointy end that you use to touch the metal contacts to see if there's voltage there. And the other end has an alligator clip that you clip onto, a battery ground or whatever. And if you poke a wire with the pointy end and there is voltage there, then the light lights up. It's an incredibly quick way to check circuits to see if they're active, if they have voltage going to them. And you can, quote unquote, flip the test light around. You can, clip the alligator clip to the positive lead and then poke stuff. And if the light turns on, that means you have ground where you've poked. It's incredibly useful. I guess I should do a video at some point of sort of the crossover between electronics and automotive, because there is quite a bit of crossover. In fact, a lot of the electronics hobbyists could probably diagnose most of their vehicles' electrical problems with only their knowledge they have, already. There's not much more knowledge you need. There's a little bit of how-to stuff because sometimes the connectors are hard to get apart. It's hard to, understand at what point a certain sensor is used. But I mean, it's all basics, like magnetic pickup coils that pick up, the signal for like cam positioning or crankshaft positioning. You've got potentiometers that are used for positioning, of less than 180 degrees. So basically, like your throttle plate when you accelerate, when you hit your accelerator pedal, that's actually read off. It's two potentiometers that are in opposing polarities that just cross each other, basically. And your computer, which we call a PCM, it's usually PGMFI control module. PGMFI means programmed module fuel injection or something like that. PGMFI. I actually don't remember. PGM. FI means fuel injection, and the I don't actually remember. Let me just look that up really quick. You're kind of like joining me. Okay, it is programmed fuel injection. So PGM means programmed. Well, there we go. So I knew what it was, but I confused myself. So yeah, the computer module basically reads off the value of two potentiometers, which are hooked up in reverse of each other, to make sure that the inputs aren't erroneous, and then it does what it does. It increases the fueling to the engine accordingly. It's super basic stuff for electronics people, but for tradespeople that are kind of let me tell you, tradespeople are very intelligent, but they are self-limiting. They sort of like I'm going to try to say this as kindly as possible, because I do mean it with a lot of kindness. I find a lot of tradespeople get into their own heads. They kind of buy into the rhetoric that, the old guard in their shops and workplaces, the ones that are teaching them, they kind of buy into their mentality that new technology equals overly complicated ways to do things. And I strongly disagree with that, because all that new technology really did to engines and vehicles and stuff like that is add layers on top. Still easily understandable layers, because it's just more of the same, that protects the engine and the occupants, the drivers, from catastrophic failures. There's a lot fewer engines that blow up these days compared to, older engines. And these new engines are being pushed way harder, like way harder. It's very rare for, a car these days to throw, a connecting rod through the block, make a big hole in the block, and be a total write-off, compared to back in the carbureted days when a car was relying on a carburetor to get its fueling. And the simple reason for that is more stuff is monitored, and the computer can actually take control of the engine. And the computer is able to run the engine at a sort of like a lower power mode, lower efficiency mode, in order to be safer and get you home. That's what it's called a limp home mode. The computer can do that. It can overfuel the engine, so it'll run pretty rich. It can lower the maximum revs. It can lower the output power. And it'll be able to just get you home. Whereas if you have something like a carburetor, one of the jets gets, a little bit clogged, your engine starts running super lean and starts heating up like crazy. It gets so hot, when in a lean condition, that it can actually start melting holes through the pistons. I mean, ask anybody with an old two-stroke. As soon as you have a compromised gasket on your two-stroke, too much air comes in, and then it runs super lean and melts a hole through the piston. So these failures are a lot less common today. I mean, there's other failures that are a result of manufacturers pushing the envelopes of manufacturing, but I would say it's a lot less common to be stranded on the side of the road. Your car gives you way more warning. You have to ignore way more before your car gets that bad. And so, if anyone listening is interested in a sort of like a quick video chronicling, electronics knowledge that is relevant to automotive, or maybe just a couple automotive sensor teardowns and explainers on how they work, geared towards a non-automotive crowd, geared towards, electronics hobbyists, let me know, because I have a few components around here that might be interesting for little teardowns like that. And so that's a possibility. I mean, it's not like I don't have any ideas for videos. I have right now way more ideas than I have time. And so I plan on responsibilizing others in order to, or sort of involving others in order for me to be able to make more content on a regular interval. Because if it's just left to me, especially after a long week with a lot of hours worked, I would just rather sit here and listen to podcasts or whatever instead of work. But I really do want to get YouTube videos done. It's a little bit like that thing where I want them to be done, but going through the effort of doing them is, daunting. So it's one of those things. If I force myself to do more work, I'll be happier with the results, even though it'll be a little bit more treacherous when I do more work. I do need to set some time aside for some recreation, though, because, again, like I've been working a lot of hours, especially on the college stuff. I've been working with my colleague at the new job, doing a little bit more physical work, busting my hands a lot more because I'm working on sort of like fleet vehicles and all sorts of vehicles. I actually plan on playing a new video game, just a chill game, just a relaxing game, Euro Truck Simulator. I don't know if anyone heard it, but you play in as a truck driver, basically driving around Europe doing deliveries and stuff. And I feel like that's just a nice and chill game that I can get into to just unwind a bit. So I've bought this like a week ago, and I've installed it, but I haven't even played it. So that's how busy I've been. Been just insanely busy. Just a quick interruption to talk about this episode's sponsor, PCBWay. PCBWay has been a long-term sponsor of the channel, and I think they're a good match for my channel because they provide quality PCBs for a reasonable price. You can get boards manufactured up to 100 mils by 100 mils for just $5. Including shipping to Canada, $15 US. Including shipping to USA, $12 US, which is incredibly cheap for professionally manufactured PCBs. I can personally attest to the quality of these PCBs, and so if you want a circuit immortalized forever, check out PCBWay.com with the link in the description. Now back to the conversation. I had a 3D printer take a poop on me. So basically, I have this 3D printer that was sent as a review unit from a company I'm pretty sure not many people have heard of. It's called Shiey. You can still sort of find them around, but it's really hard to find. I really liked the machine, it comes with a lot of really cool features. It has like a sort of like a volcano style hot end. It has a dual gear all metal extruder. It has a big build volume. I think it's 310 mils by 310 mils by 310. So I think it's 310, 310, 310. So just over a foot in all directions. But when I got it, the software was absolutely horrid. It would pause in between each layer. And that pause would mean that it would like put a blob of stuff on the material. So it would blob like crazy. And also it would it would shift, like it would layer shift left, right, and center. And I had contacted the company, and I was like, "This, I mean, the machine is great in principle." Oh, and there was a shipping damage too. I was like, "The machine is great in principle, but the software is just junk." And even like the filament unloading didn't work, but loading worked. It didn't make any sense. But anyways, I got some of the kinks worked out, and it's actually been a fairly reliable printer. It was reliable enough that I was able to tear down my Tronxy X3A, my old reliable, and upgrade some parts in it because I had a working 3D printer. If I broke something on the Tronxy, I can use that 3D printer to fix things. But when I was printing parts for my latest PCBWay video, it started spewing some like black stuff, like really like burnt filament all over my prints. So I was like, what the heck is going on now? And I tried to pull the silicone sock off the hot end, and it was stuck. Like the silicone sock was like glued to the hot end. I was like, that's not right. Something's wrong here. So I heated it up and then tried removing the sock. And when I removed the silicone sock, I noticed that all underneath the silicone sock, all of the inside, is just filled with burnt filament, which has been spewing from the top of the heater block. The heater block then was actually loose, like it wasn't hot tightened from the factory. For those of you that don't know, when you put together a 3D printer hot end for the first time, you're supposed to mount it onto its mountings in the machine, and then heat it up to working temperature, and then tighten down all the components. Well, that wasn't done on this one, so the heater block loosened, and the pressure of pushing filament through was squirting filament out the top, which was being caught by the silicone sock, and it all ran down the silicone sock as all burnt stuff. So whatever, not a big deal. I had it heated up, I tightened everything down, and then I made it redo a homing sequence and all this stuff. It printed 2 more times flawlessly. Perfect, right? And so then I just sent it to do the last piece that I needed to shoot my video, and the nozzle buried itself into the heater bed, or the heated bed, and then it like destroyed the whole heated bed. Like the heater part is fine, but the magnetic build plate and the magnet underneath that magnetic build plate completely destroyed. And so now I have, a 3D printer, which I thought was reliable after fixing it, and it worked twice after fixing it, and now it just decided to destroy itself. So then I check, what's going on with this, and then I make it do an auto leveling sequence, and the bed leveling, the auto bed leveler, it has like a 3D touch, which is basically a BL Touch knockoff. For whatever reason, now cannot reach the bed before the nozzle does. And by the way, it worked fine twice, but now there's no chance, there's no way of the auto leveling sensor to touch the bed before the nozzle does. So it just rams itself into the bed. So I took apart I reheated up everything first and foremost. And then I tried to re-slide the whole assembly into the cooler because the cooler is what sort of bolted together. And it's bottomed out. All the set screws are tight. I loosen them. I tried to push it up higher. It doesn't work. It's bottomed out. It's all the way up. So it's not like the whole assembly slid down. Then I took out the 3D leveling sensor, 3D touch, and I shimmed it down. And it still wasn't low enough. And I compared it with a brand new unit, and they have the same rod length. I have no idea what happened. I shimmed it down further, and now with baby stepping, I can actually get it to print stuff, but the bed is still completely ruined, and so I have to order a new bed. Pain in the frickin' butt, and then, then I have to mess with the software to make a new Z offset because you can't do it in the menus. Such a pain in the butt. I really thought this thing was working, and it was working. It was printing flawlessly, and now it just became, another junker. So I'm setting that one off to the side. I still have 2 other 3D printers, right? Don't feel bad for me. I got some printers. So I've got my Tronxy X3A, the old reliable, and I've got a used, I bought used, man, it must be over a year ago now, Tronxy X5 SA, which is a Core XY sort of like massive thing, which I paid very little money for. I still can't believe I got it that cheap, but the guy built it like crap. But anyways, this thing is not reliable because it does not have auto bed leveling, which I don't like, which means that the Z offset is very hard to adjust. And the way it's designed, it's just not a fantastic machine. I mean, the frame is fine, the motion is fine, the bed is fine. It's just that with, auto bed leveling and a few little upgrades like a magnetic bed sticker and stuff like that, it'll be a lot better. And in fact, it'd be nice to have Wi-Fi, all sorts of little things like that bother me. So the plan is convert the X5 SA, the bigger Core XY machine. Oh yeah, and the belts aren't straight the way it is. The belts are all crooked. It's just not a good design. Okay, but the frame is fine. So the plan is to convert it to linear rails, which I have in hand. There is a project on Thingiverse that designed the conversion already, so I don't have to do it, which is great. I'll just have to build it. And then instead of reprogramming it to, with new coordinates or whatever, I'll use one of the control boards that I have here in stock already and convert this machine to basically use an SKR 1.3 board, silent steppers, has LCD screen, Wi-Fi, all of that cool stuff. So I'll convert it to fully new electronics. Gonna redo all the end stops. It's gonna do auto leveling. It's gonna do all that stuff. And so, and also with a upgrade in the firmware, it means I can also remove the weird skewing that it has. It prints a little bit like if you try to print a square, it prints a little bit diamond shaped because of the tension on the belts. So that thing will become, hopefully my second reliable workhorse. And then the plan, I think, will be to gut the Shinwini one, remove the control board out of that and replace it with an aftermarket board and just run, stock Marlin. Actually, I might even just try to flash stock Marlin onto that board that's in there. But for the moment, I just need to, I need to separate myself from that software. It's absolutely horrid. So yeah, that's the plan. So my X3A right now is printing like a freaking champ. And theoretically, the way it sits, it should be able to print ABS It definitely prints PETG. I've already printed with it before. Should be able to even more now. And so, yeah, that's the plan. I'm going to be converting, my printers to be reliable. Might cost me a little bit of money. Might have to buy another control board. We'll have to see. But I am totally into it. This kind of, sort of working, kind of sort of not working thing is just, that's not working out for me. I want to standardize everything and just have everything working because, like I said, I don't have much time these days, so I need to be able to rely on these machines, especially if I'm trying to get a video out and, I need to print 4 or 5 parts. I need those parts, right? I need to be able to just load up the machines and go. And especially here in Ontario, with our electricity being so expensive, I have to wait until 7 p.m. to start 3D prints or wait till the weekend because the electricity is nearly half the cost after 7 p.m. So that's the deal there. So we're towards the back half of the podcast now, and I just wanted to share with you a little bit of how I've been unwinding in my busy days. So I watch a lot of YouTube, which should be no surprise to anybody, but I'd like to talk to you about a couple of non-electronics related channels that I love watching. I basically don't miss, any of their videos. And I'm not going to get all of them, but I'm just going to highlight a few. Now, if you're looking for suggestions on electronics channels to watch, well then all you have to do is go through the playlist for the podcast, and any one of those people will have a really good electronics-based or 3D printer-based YouTube channel for you to check out. Each and every one of them are great in their own respect, but for when I need to turn my brain off, I can't really watch electronics content. There's some stuff that I can watch, but sometimes I just want to escape a little bit or watch something, for example, before bed where I may not catch, all of it. And so, yeah, the electronic stuff, go look at the playlist. This is not about that. So first and foremost, I've talked about them before. The H3 podcast is my jam. It has nothing to do with electronics. Actually, it's like the furthest thing away from electronics. It's like YouTube drama type stuff. So I love it because it has nothing to do with electronics. So when I just need to turn my brain off, I can. But Ethan and the H3 crew, they don't really need a shout out. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about them. All I will say though, is that if you're going to watch a couple episodes, you're going to need a couple episodes in order to get into it if you're coming in cold. And it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. I know it. It's nearly a guilty pleasure for me. I like it because it's entertaining and entertaining alone. So I like the people on there. The content they make is fantastic, although, the furthest thing possible from my everyday interests. A YouTube channel that's a little bit more closely aligned with my interest is RCTestFlight. RCTestFlight is a gentleman with one of the greatest first names ever, and he does more so remote control stuff. So remote control vehicle type things. He's most notable for having built a DIY or designed and built a DIY remote control snowcat, like a vehicle that uses, like tracks, but that is made specifically for use in the snow, based upon the snow grooming vehicles that they use in ski lifts and ski hills and those kinds of places. Which is great because that's actually the types of vehicles that I seem to work on the most these days in my new job. But recently he has taken to buying a small boat, and he's restored the fiberglass on it. Then he's designed his own electric motors for them. I mean, I think the motors are off the shelf, the motors themselves, but the whole apparatus to mount it, his batteries and all that stuff is all DIY stuff. And then he hooked it up to an autopilot software that he makes waypoint missions, and it brings him along in tow, which is pretty freaking awesome. I mean, I think it started before that even, because he made himself a little tugboat, remote control tugboat that was automated and dragged him around in an inflatable kayak. So this kind of stuff aligns with me very well because, I dream of having a sort of like over Unity power generation boat with an electric motor to putt around. And in fact, if you go on my website, there is an article I put there, simpleelectronics.ca, and there's an article I put there that I want to make an electric raft to do a very famous route here, which is the Rideau Canal system that links Ottawa to Kingston and then overall to the Lake Ontario. And so he's doing something very similar, except better, and he's actually doing it. And he plans on adding solar panel wings that'll fold out and be able to power his boat for a very long time, maybe infinitely. I don't know if he's going over Unity. The boat he's using is very inefficient. It's a Boston whaler. It's really meant for stability at high speeds, not really efficiency at low speeds. But it is really interesting what he's doing. So I'm going to leave a link in the description to the boat video, but I do suggest you go over there and check it out. He's very entertaining. His videos are very good, and I mean, I would love to have him on the podcast, for example. Another YouTube channel I like to watch when I'm winding down is a YouTube channel called Shiey, Shiey. I'll put a link in the description, as always. So Shiey, I have to guess, is from Eastern Europe somewhere. And his videos caught my attention when he visited the Chernobyl exclusion zone. So basically, he didn't do it legally. It's kind of like sneaking in and hiding from the patrols and stuff like that, and then sneaking out. But it was really cool following along his journey into the Chernobyl exclusion zone, and looking at cool stuff that hasn't been seen, in whatever the amount of years. Was it in the 80s? So are we talking like nearly 40 years? Geez, that's been a long time. He also does train surfing. So he rides, in cargo trains in the wagons, of course, illegally as well. But it's really cool, the sense of freedom that you get riding in like an open train car and seeing the horizons and the landscapes and stuff like that. So it's a really cool channel if you want to see sort of like old, USSR-ish type stuff. He goes down in bunkers. You get to see a lot of views that you don't get to see unless you want to, jump on train wagons, which is not recommended. So yeah, his channel, very cool too, and not really something that most people will think of watching, but I think it's really interesting. So I'll talk about it here. Another really cool channel I like watching is Matthias Wandel, who is a Canadian YouTuber. Actually, he used to live in Ottawa, and as far as I know now, he's in New Brunswick somewhere. But he's basically an engineer at heart. I don't know if he's like actually classically trained as an engineer. I know he used to work for BlackBerry. It's that phone company that your weird old relatives used to use as phones. But that was a Canadian company, and he makes all sorts of cool machines and on the surface simple machines out of wood. He basically does everything out of wood. He built himself like a bandsaw out of wood. He makes wooden gears. He created a a template software to make gear templates that you can then print and then glue onto wood, and then you can cut it. You can probably import them into 3D software and just have them 3D printed and stuff like that. He's a really cool guy. We talked over email a little bit. I just reached out, and this was before the podcast, and told him I loved his channel and stuff. And I told him he was in that I was in Ottawa too, and stuff like that. So he was a really nice guy. We didn't meet up or anything, that's totally fine. I probably wouldn't want to meet up with randos from the internet as well. But yeah, his stuff is very cool, and he does a lot of work with Raspberry Pis and temperature sensors and stuff like that. He made an entire wooden jig to break pieces of wood to determine, which species of tree makes for the strongest wood to build machines out of, and stuff like that. His stuff varies a lot from sort of like making furniture up into, making these complex machines with wooden gears and stuff like that. He was actually on a local TV show here, showcasing his marble machines. He had like machines that would, send marbles down ramps and all sorts of things, and then it would come back up automatically. Really cool stuff. Highly recommend you check out his channel. He took a couple sponsorships recently to get like EcoFlow, those big power banks. But the issue with them is that he tried to charge the power bank while using the output, and he fried one of the boards, and there was a whole bunch of drama going on there. And so really interesting stuff. Also, he is never shy to break out a oscilloscope to take a look at what's going on. So it's a really good channel. I do recommend Matthias Wandel as well. Another cool and really relaxing channel to watch is Xyla Foxlin. Xyla is a maker. I think she's in California. She's pretty well known for having built sort of like epoxy and wood type constructions. I think she built her own canoe, a kayak, a paddle, stuff like that. She also made a wooden rocket, not a full-size rocket. I mean, I'm sure she would if she had the funding for it, but like a model rocket, although it was pretty big. It must have been at least 5 feet long, and fired it off in the desert. She made her own teardrop camper. I mean, she's done some really cool stuff. It seems like she's working on another boat. Looks like she's working on a sailboat based on her Twitter. So really cool stuff. Her build videos are very well edited and stuff. So it's more like entertainment and going on a journey with her rather than how to do this yourself. Although there is a lot of helpful tips and advice in her videos. She also she's sponsored, I believe. I don't know if it's a monetary sponsor or just a material sponsor by Total Boat, which is sort of like an epoxy resin type company. And her content is awesome. She's another one on the list to have on the podcast, but I'm just not sure how to reach out to her because it just doesn't seem to be working. Although I have had previous guests to the podcast tell me that they have contacted her before or they have met her before, and she is just one of the busiest people you'll ever meet. And looking at the progress of her videos, it seems pretty obvious that that's the truth. So, no shade at all. But yeah, if ever she had an opening in her schedule and, if you're listening to this, Xyla, I'd love to have you on the podcast. I'd love to pick your brain about a couple things. Another great YouTube channel I love to unwind with is Camping with Steve. I think one of the commenters once called him the Bob Ross of camping, and I do believe that's quite accurate. He's a Canadian from the prairies somewhere, Edmonton, Alberta, pretty much Canada's Texas, if you will. Or is it Canada's Florida? One of those two. But anyways, he goes what he likes to call stealth camping, where he would go camping where he's not supposed to be and tries to blend in with the environment, have a little bit of a meal, usually way too big of a meal, and just hang out for the evening. It's such great videos to put on and go to sleep to, because it's not very actiony. I mean, some of his videos have some action in it because he almost gets caught a couple times, but mostly it's just sort of hanging out in wilderness, having a beer with inexpensive camping gear, very achievable stuff. Sometimes there's like inclement weather, and you get to see how he deals with it. He's also a gas fitter by trade, either a gas fitter or like a HVAC tech, something like that, furnace tech. And so he does drop some knowledge on you about, propane and those little propane heaters. He uses a little propane heater a lot because he is in Canada. But he just seems like a normal, everyday guy. And you just hang out with him while he, has some beers, either, with a little fire going on his acreage where he lives, or on Vancouver, on Victoria Island in BC, Vancouver Island, I think, in British Columbia. And he just has this ability to make these little mundane sounding outings be entertaining. It's just calm, relaxing, good vibes all around, that kind of stuff. So yeah, Camping with Steve, definite recommendation. It's not the type of video that you can easily explain what's so great about it. It just is, and you just have to see for yourself. So again, link in the description to all these that I'm talking about. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention South Main Auto Repair. Now, a lot of you aren't automotive people, and that's completely fine. But what I like about South Main, which sets him apart, is that he shares his reasoning for what he's doing, the choices he's making, and sort of the automotive theory behind those choices when relevant. And so it's actually not specifically an automotive person's channel. It's actually accessible to everyone, at least everyone that has, kind of like at least a minor sense of what's going on in their car. Really cool because he explains everything, down to the beginner level, whether that be advertent or inadvertent. He also has interactions with his, he has a dog and a cat that's always at work with him, an employee. We don't see the employee too much, and his wife is also works with him, and you get to see their interactions together. I love it because, he basically brings you along for the journey. It's more of a storytelling of, car comes in with problem A, and the steps he took to, resolve problem A. It's not necessarily like do this, and this. It's more like I'm going to try this because I think this, then this. And what's really cool is that he has such a wealth of knowledge that me being a dealership trained guy, I do things I learned to do things the way Honda intended me to fix their cars. Like I followed their procedures. Eric at South Main Auto, he is more of a general shop guy. In fact, he is a general shop guy because he works on pretty much everything. But even picking up a Honda, he follows those same procedures. Like he came to the same conclusion of using the same steps without the sort of dealership training that I got. I personally think that Eric is some sort of genius, but I don't think, I don't think he thinks that of himself, especially because he doubts himself all the time while on camera and doing diagnostics. One big example, I think there's not many people in this trade that can handle, communications problems like, CAN bus issues where the modules can't talk to each other. And I mean, at the surface, the system is pretty simple, but the issue is being sure of what you're talking about, because there's a couple things that could happen internally in a module that causes communication errors to progress, and they're very hard to sort of put your finger on exactly what's wrong. So he was dealing with it very strategically, which is very nice. It's actually a video I'm going to show to my students, because he's the way he tackled it is the ideal way to do it. He broke up the system into sections and then, cut off sections and see if the problem went away. So really good of him to sort of explain his steps. You can see that he wasn't confident in what he was doing, but he got to the right answer in the end. And once he knew for sure that was the right answer, then, all bets are off. Confidence is back. Everyone's good. But yeah, Eric O from South Main Auto, he's just an entertaining person, but he's also a very knowledgeable person, and he's a good storyteller as well. So I do recommend you go check out his stuff. If you happen to go on anybody's channel that I mentioned in this podcast, it would be really appreciated if you went in their comments section and left them a positive comment about what you liked about their content, and that you came from, this podcast shouting them out. There's this weird thing that happens on YouTube where creators, especially slightly bigger creators, they get spammed all the time by either people wanting to advertise, people asking questions, or basically wanting them to work for free, and all sorts of things like that. And so they get bombarded typically with lots of negativity as well. And so if I were to reach out to these creators and say, hey, I talked about your channel on the podcast, I think you're great, all these things, it could get lost in the noise. It's not easy filtering the sort of the positive from the negative on YouTube. And so if you go and check out their channel and you like their content, I would recommend you leave a comment telling them that. I think they deserve at least that. But perhaps let them know that, that there's a podcast saying nice things about them, because even though they won't be forced, they won't feel obliged to come over here and thank me for it or anything like that. I think it's just really good for them to know that if they want to, they can listen to the podcast and know and see what I said about them. If I reach out and I say, all sorts of things like check out the podcast that talked about you, it sounds like self-promotion, and that's really not what I'm going for here. I don't really want them, to shout me out or to, tell their subscribers to come listen over here. That's not the point. The point is to give you guys something more to listen to, when you need to wind down or whatever. I just want to highlight a couple channels I watch. So I think the best way for that not to sound like self-promotion is for you to go check out their channels. And if you like them, then let them know, because I think people who do hard work, and all the creators I talked about, I've got a massive list, by the way, but the podcast is only so long. But all the people who work on their channels like that, all these channels that I've mentioned are all fantastic creators, and they deserve to know that their work is good. And if you are one of those creators that maybe you tuned into the podcast, I do legitimately watch your content, and you could send me an email and ask me some trivia questions. I'll probably be able to answer them. So yeah, we're just going to end the podcast here then, because I'm just incredibly busy. It's now 9:51 p.m. and I got to get up in the morning to shovel. I have to edit this too. So thanks everyone for listening. When I'm really busy and I have to drag my feet a bit and make the podcast, it's because of the positive comments I got. Lots of people, or more and more people, are reaching out telling me that they love the podcast. It's because of people like you that I keep going and keep doing the podcast. So thank you everyone for listening. your patronage, not that you're joining Patreon, but the fact that you're listening to the podcast, your patronage being here is really noticed, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate every one of you listening. Thanks for listening.